Hello, and welcome back to the show, World War II Books Where to Start. I'm your host, Sigmund Freud, and today let's get psychological about some stuff. But first of all, a little housekeeping is in order. Welcome to all the new subscribers I've gotten recently. Very gratifying to me. Love it, and hope that trend continues. Second of all, I've got a poll up on the community tab on my homepage on my channel. If you'd like to suggest a topic for a video to do next, I've got like 5 different topics there, or you could just suggest one in the comment section of a video or this video, whatever. I'd love to hear from you what you'd like to see me do next. And then today, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do, let's talk about Hitler. And I mean in the psychological sense. What made Hitler Hitler? Or in today's parlance, how and when did he become Hitler? That's the big trend. Is it becoming X, Y, and Z? Is the big trend in biographies and celebrity nonsense of their stardom. But it is an essential question for history. When did Hitler become the evil maniac that we know and despise and obsess over today? In popular culture, Hitler is like the ultimate reference point for an argument, right? When something's gone too far and no one's agreeing with you or you feel like you're getting piled on, the response in social media forums is always, well, that's just a Hitler response, or you're just like Hitler, or you're talking like a Nazi. It's an ultimate stopgap that will be reached, like going nuclear in a conflict. You just compare someone to Hitler and the argument ends, right? But what is Hitler? Who is Hitler? Who was Hitler? What was he? What was he all about, really? Now you could go with the biographies, and I've got a video on the biographies, but if you want to get more into the psychological and historiographical aspect of it, how we perceive him today and what his real role in history was, and what his real role in history will be in the future as future generations contemplate what the Nazi movement was. It's a different question. So today I'm going to throw 3 books at you and see if you can get at that question yourself, and maybe you've wondered about it, maybe you haven't, but here we go. First of all, will be Last Days of Hitler by Hugh Trevor Roper. And this is originally from 1947. Hugh Trevor Roper was British. He was a Don at Cambridge, I believe, and got drafted into the services and ended up at SIS and maybe Bletchley Park also, doing intelligence work during the war, decoding stuff through Enigma, and became obsessed with the Abwehr. And that was kind of his ballywick. Traveled to Germany after war under the auspices of the British government to investigate what actually happened to Hitler in the final days and make sure there's no truth to the rumors that he escaped. So he got interviews with everybody he could and cobbled together the book and was clear for publication after the Nuremberg trials were over. And it became, I guess, like a classic, because I listened to the 1971 version, which claimed to be the 9th edition in 1971, and it's still in print today. And like I say, he just passed away in 2003. So it provided a lifelong stream of income for him. And it has become like the baseline of Hitler studies, right? However, reading it today, it is of very diminished value. We've moved far beyond that kind of that era. I mean, it was really contemporary and cutting edge, and gave readers an insight into what was going on in Berlin in those last days, with the coterie, the entourage, the hangers-on, the desperate, and of course the star of the show himself, Hitler. But today, it's not so valuable. The writing is really bitter and sarcastic and kind of extremely cynical at times, and he's got his fascinations and his obsessions, especially with Schellenberg. He makes way too much of Schellenberg. But I guess that makes sense because he was in the intelligence community and he was keeping tabs on the Abwehr. So yeah, he'd have a bit of a fixation about Schellenberg. He is very respectful of Speer. That post-war glow about Speer as being the good Nazi, it affected him too, and he had kind of blinders on about it. I thought Goebbels was the smartest tack in the bunch. He thought he was really the smartest fellow in the room at any given time, and had the most perception about what the regime was, and was fully cognizant of what it was, and was fine with it. And he was actually true to his convictions, dying in the bunker with Hitler. And aside from that, I really can't find anything to crow about it for. I mean, I guess as a baseline, yeah, but there's a better source for that. I mean, I would rarely say skip the book and go to the movie, but this is an exception. Downfall from 2004, starring Bruno Ganz, the best Hitler I've ever seen on screen, and I don't think it will be ever topped. This is told through the eyes of his final secretary from the time she was hired to the end of the war, and when he went kablooey in the bunker those last 2-3 weeks, absolutely stark raving mad, I guess you could say. finally, a gradual nervous collapse and a full breakdown, including the infamous scene that has been parodied in every meme on YouTube millions of times, his final screaming military conference where he just goes berserk on everyone. So Downfall is just a great summation of the last days of Hitler, and it's long. It's about 3 hours, but well worthwhile. And if you don't mind subtitles, of course, you got to go with it. Don't dub it. It's terrible dubbed. Dubbing's bad. The Hitler of History by John Lukács. And I had to look this pronunciation up online, so hopefully that is correct. He was Hungarian born and passed away in 2019. Born in 1924, died in 2019. As a teen, he was impressed in a labor battalion for the Nazis in Budapest and lived through the siege of Budapest, escaped to America after the war and never looked back and never went back so far as I know. Hitler History clocks in at 268 pages. This is from 1997. And this is an ostensibly a refutation of David Irving's whole Nazi sympathizing writing history, but especially the path to war and Hitler's war, where he really soft sells the entire war. Hitler was not aware of everything, blah, 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 and he really wasn't that bad of a guy, blah, blah, blah. And Lukács had a really big time grudge and hatred, you could say, literary hatred against him. So Hitler History was his response, and this is really difficult material. I read it a long time ago, and I really struggled with it. Probably need to redo it again now that I got a lot more depth in the topic of World War II after all these years. But man, it's a reference to just about every published article or book about Hitler. Literary, scientific, scholarly, cross-referencing different historians' viewpoints, different writers' viewpoints on him, and what the Hitler of history, what he is, and how he has shifted definitions and meanings as time has gone on. It's very dense, and it's not a quick read. This is like walking into a pit of quicksand. It's going to take you a while, despite the slimness of the volume. There are no sources for the book. It's all footnoted. And that's in the text. Everything he's got to say parenthetically, there are dozens and dozens of footnotes. It's a bit much if you're not well-versed in Third Reich writing. You may be lost in the jungle really quick trying to figure out who this writer was and who he's talking about this guy and how is that connected to the dots to here and what does it mean for Hitler. So I recommend it only if you're well versed in it, but it does get at the psychology and psychiatry of Hitler, both in his lifetime and again how he's perceived downstream to down generations, what he is today to us living in the wake of that time. So it's interesting, but it is difficult material. And then the star of the show today, Explaining Hitler by Ron Rosenbaum from 1998. This has to be one of the best introductions I've ever read in my life to a book. Read it twice. And I don't mean that sarcastically. Read it twice. It's going to give you an idea of the depth and complexity here. Ron Rosenbaum was born in 1946. He's been written extensively as a journalist for the New York Times and New Yorker magazine. And he really went for the Mount Everest climb here, tackling this topic, Explaining Hitler, the search for the origins of his evil. That's a tough one. And he could not come to any one particular agreement. The dozens of people he interviewed extensively for this book, everyone's got a different vision of Hitler. Very few people agree as even to the principal moments of his life, what they meant and what they implied for the future of his career. So it's a deep topic, and that introduction is going to give you a little taste of that. The first couple chapters are a bit anticlimactic. After that great introduction, they're a bit of a tease. He's finding his footing, he's finding his way. But then once he gets into the debate of the historians versus historians, then it's fantastic. Now again, I think this requires some background knowledge of these other books and these other writers he's interviewing. But if you've got that and you really want to go deep on Hitler, here it is, man. This is down the rabbit hole forever and ever and ever. You may not find the bottom of the well. You really may not. This is my second time reading it, and I'm still fascinated. I could go back and redo it again today, and I just finished it like 2 weeks ago. It's awesome. I would give it 7 stars if that was a thing on a 5-star scale. So what are we talking about here? Well, aside from the historians' debate about the literary sources, interpretations, Marxist versus capitalist versus imperialist interpretations in the Western world versus the Eastern communist world, we have also got specific dates. When did he turn to the dark side? Was it after the war at Pasewalk, when he was recovering from the gas attack and heard of the capitulation of the German forces at the end of the Great War? Was it in Vienna when he was a youth? And he, as he describes in Mein Kampf, he has the experience of meeting an Eastern Jew walking along the sidewalk, and he asks himself, is this a person, or better yet, is this a German? Was it later? Was it in Munich after the death of Geli Raval? Was it earlier with his mother's death from cancer after treatment from a Jewish doctor? Was it during the Great War itself, being shell-shocked? And no one can agree. He's going to go through that extensively. Now, no one places it later, I don't think, than, say, 31. And I think I'm probably dating a little bit late there. No one says he became the Hitler of history after 31. People want to, just about everybody wants to cut off at Geli Raval's death. That the trigger point has to be there or before. Pretty much makes sense. His self-aggrandizement after 33 is obvious, but he was already clearly set on the path. So the debate is, when did the path begin? And there are some other wacky explanations that go really off the beaten path, left and right, and into you've got to be kidding me territory. And by this I mean Simon Wiesenthal had a notion that it was Hitler's contact with the Jewish horde that gave him syphilis in Vienna. That triggered him. There's the question of the donkey bite. A story told by a dude who knew Hitler as a kid, and as a prank one day, as kids will do, they were debating whether they could pee in the mouth of a donkey. And supposedly Hitler tried it, and the donkey bit the tip of his dick. That's a classic. Yeah, that might make it a little bitter and weird, but not in that direction of let's kill everybody. Then there's the sexual stuff, especially about Geli Raval, his half-niece. And apparently this was a thing in southern Germany for half-nephew-niece relationships to be tolerated and understood. Like cousin-to-cousin marriages were understood as a thing. You get special dispensation from the Catholic Church under certain circumstances to allow a marriage to go forward. So people have always wondered, was he just a parental figure to Geli, or was there a sexual relationship? And no one knows the answer, but there's plenty of speculation. And here's where Pussy Hamstengel comes into the picture, his interview with Alan Bullock concerning Hitler's purported sexual preferences. And that's when we get into the weird stuff, right? It's covered in detail in here, but just let's say the matters of golden showers and Cleveland steamers come up and are speculated upon as serious potential triggers of his evilness, or indicating he was way off the scale morality all along. So there's that. Family secrets. Was he partly of Jewish ancestry? This has pretty much been 99% debunked over the years. No one's got a clue. The genealogy just does not exist to support it, and it's very unlikely. But the rumor still persists that maybe he was ashamed of some Jewish ancestry in his history, and that triggered him from the get-go once he discovered that, because he did cover up his family origins in Austria and destroyed documents as he could. He wanted to be just the man of the moment and not have anyone dig, skeletons out of the closet. So there's that. Then there's the Jewish doctor that treated his mother for cancer. As you might imagine, in the early 1900s, treatment for cancer was pretty crude and pretty ineffective. And Hitler's mother did suffer a great deal of physical pain from this doctor's treatment, and she did eventually die from the cancer. But to note that this doctor was not exterminated during the Third Reich. Hitler gave him free pass to come to the States, and he lived happily ever after in New York City, I believe. And he gave several interviews after the war saying, he was a fine young man at the time, very polite, no signs of outward aggression, nothing abnormal about him at all. This also goes along with the same doctor who had treated Hitler as a pediatrician in his youth, and that comes back to the one testicle theory that has been floated around for decades, and indeed was even a marching song in the Allied armies during the war, and was used as a psychological buffer in boot training camps sometimes. Can't be afraid of this guy, he's only got one ball. Alan Bullock discusses this thoroughly in his biography of Hitler, and where it's going to be recapitulated here again. Again, there's no evidence, and the doctor denies it, absolutely denies it. Said, nope, he was normal in all physical respects. And yes, I did examine him, I would have known this. And nope, I can say truthfully, nothing there. But the rumor persists, and the idea that there's something abnormal about his physical being that contributed to the mental ill-being. We'll probably never know on 100%, but then again, this is one I would decline. It's like, no, it's just not there. If the doctor says it didn't happen, you got to go with that. And then there's the novel. A survivor of the Holocaust wrote a novel, The Portage to San Cristobal of A.H. This appeared in the late 60s or early 70s, I believe. It's a weird title. I've got to get a hold of this book. I still haven't after all these years. It is out of print, and the price point's always been a little too high for me for the length. It's only like a 200-page novel, so I'm not willing to go high on the price point for this, but I do want to experience it eventually. This is kind of playing into novelistically the idea of Nazis escaping to South America and living in the jungle. In the novel, he does that, but he's chased down by Allied authorities, and on the way back to civilization and justice, something happens. Either he falls ill, or they're cut off by rebels in the jungle. I can't remember what the exact plot device is, but the Allied guys that went in to get him treat him to a abrupt court-martial right there in the jungle, and he gives his defense of his life and his actions. This became a stage play in the mid to late 70s, causing a bit of a ruckus, as you might imagine, because the play ends with his peroration, and as it does in the novel, his final defense on the witness stand, and the audience applauds raucously, and the curtain drops and play over. And the debate was, are they applauding Hitler's speech, or are they applauding the play as a great piece of art? But it caused a great deal of ruckus at the time, in the late 70s, which I was a kid, I wouldn't be aware of it. But it's the reason I want to read the novel. And it plays into this, how we perceive Hitler, how he's perceived in modern pop culture. It all goes into what Hitler was, what wasn't he. Ron Rosenbaum never tells you his own theory. Nope. He's here. He's a reporter. He's not here he's not a biography. He's not here to pass final judgment on it. He leaves it as open and question for you to solve yourself. And that's admirable restraint, considering the lengths he went to get all these people on paper. The filmmakers, the survivors, the historians, the journalists, everybody. It's a tremendous effort. I, however, would pin him down on the Gelly Erbal thing, because I think he's got one too many chapters on Gelly and kind of floats around her nonstop for a bit too long. I think that's his personal preference for the origins of the evil, whether it was the controlling nature of Hitler's relationship, whether the dominance, whether it was a sexual aspect, or whether he killed her, or whether she killed herself. Again, something we'll never know for sure, but I think that's where Rosenbaum comes down on the issue. The afterword, there's a new one, and it just went to audio, and that's why I reread it at this point. There's a new afterword that's in the audio edition, and again, if you've got any affinity for audio, go for that to get the extra material. It's worthwhile, because he brings the story up to date from 98 till when he went to press with the new edition 2018, 2020-ish, somewhere around there. So he's got a few tidbits to add on to the pop culture, including the YouTube meme thing about Downfall. But he also motherfucks Hannah Arendt in a rare display of partisanship. throughout the book, he mentioned her in the body of the book and was restrained and professional. But he absolutely MFs her to death here in the afterword for being a Nazi sympathizer. She was engaged to and married a Nazi, Martin Heidegger, and she participated and got him exonerated in the denazification process after the war. And I think I can't remember if she moved overseas with him or what. But she's famous for one thing only, and one phrase only, the banality of evil during Eichmann's trial in Jerusalem, right? So Rosenbaum recounts that history and it says she's got to be the world's worst court reporter ever to come up with that phrase and believe it. What you saw him doing in the courtroom, Eichmann, was trying to get out of being hanged. No more, no less. The evil itself was not banal, wasn't everyday street level pedestrian stuff. But Eichmann's perception of it and his regurgitation of what he's willing to say in the courtroom certainly was banal. It's nothing unusual. I was just doing my job. And Rosenbaum just takes her to task for being sucked into that nonsense. So there's that. And that's worth the popcorn right there alone. Coke and the popcorn, sit back and watch the sparks fly on that one. Great stuff. So that is explaining Hitler, and that's the psychology of Hitler today. Of these three, obviously I'm leaning towards explaining Hitler is the most valuable and the one you should run out and lock yourself in a cabin and read right away if you've never experienced it. It's phenomenal. That's World War II books where to start today. I'm your host, Sigmund Freud. I've got another patient in the office by the name of J. Stalin. I wonder what he's all about. Until next time, happy reading.